It's the bye week, so we got a whole lot of recruiting news for you right here on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To another edition of Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write Inside the Huskies to Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for tuning into Locked On Huskies and making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And we're doing a whole lot of recruiting stuff today. So we're better than recruiting than right over on LinkedIn, because these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Lars, we don't just have football news today or football recruiting stuff. We got a little bit of basketball. So let's do that right off the cuff, and then we can just kind of lead back into all the football stuff. So you have a story coming out on Inside the Huskies about a certain local basketball recruit who I'm going to let you have the floor here. Let's do this.
Yeah, so formerly local, to be fair, now residing part-time in Northern California. But Zoom Diallo, former five-star point guard from Curtis High School, five-star, top 20 player in the country, took an official visit to Washington over the weekend. And it's one of those situations where Washington made his final six cut back in, I believe, January, February, March, somewhere earlier in the year, kind of start of the year. But they were viewed as kind of that fifth or sixth team. Now, for basketball and other recruits, you can take as many official visits as you want now. So there's a little bit of a caveat there. But for Washington to get him on campus after last season, a whole brand new team effectively, it does show a little bit of faith in Mike Hopkins and Will Conroy and the staff's approach and ability to recruit, because Hopkins was the one that personally made the offer to him back in 2021. So this is a long-standing relationship that they've had. So I think that's kind of a key factor here, because it's not just Will Conroy getting him on campus, right? It's not just like, hey, let's just take one visit, and then if you don't like it, you don't have to ever come back. I think this is something where Washington is slowly, quietly – similar to how Jade McDaniels picked Washington, where everybody thought he was going to Kentucky or thought he was going to Arizona. And I was telling people back when I used to work at Rivals, I was telling our Kentucky side, hey, you know what? It's going to be Kentucky and Washington. And I was saying that in September, right? So that played out all the way through March. You know, Washington was quietly that school. They just kind of stayed there. And I think the difference for Zoom is he can go to pretty much any school he wants to in the country.
Right.
Coming back home to Washington would be special. That is a significant sell. Family's been here, everything like that. And if Washington can show this season, hey, you know what? We got the talent to make it work. This is the right coaching staff. We got Quincy. We got Conroy. There's a whole lot of reasons why it would make sense for Zoom. This is kind of that first step to say, hey, Washington's not just getting their foot in the door, they're fully in the door now. So I think that this is kind of be something to watch as the season starts to come into fold in November, December. Can they get him back on campus for maybe an unofficial or something like that if he's able to make it up? Their season starts November 4th. His season at Prolific Prep starts November 4th. So there's not going to be a ton of opportunity for visits. So I think getting him early, it doesn't allow it to be a rush. There was no home game. So basically it was the perfect setting for a basketball recruit to come in and say, hey, meet the new staff, just really get connected with the players, no distractions. And I think actually that's going to pay off massively down the road, because when he goes and takes other visits and doesn't get as much time, one-on-one time with the coaching staff and things like that, those connections and those relationships are what's going to matter more down the road for Washington.
I like that a lot. And he's not the only person that Husky fans need to keep an eye on, because it also sounds like there's some smoke coming out of the state of Arizona too. And we can lead off with three-star defensive end Keona Wilhite, who's currently ranked somewhere in the 800s by 247 Sports, which is just national ranking. So I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. But he recently decommitted from Arizona, and he was somebody who was set to take an official visit to Washington over that big recruiting weekend before he did choose Arizona initially. And then, no coincidence, right after the 31-24 victory the Huskies had in the desert. I'm just joking. But not too long after that, on Monday, we record this on Tuesday afternoon, Keona Wilhite did decide to decommit from Arizona. And according to the 247 predictors, including Blair Angulo and Greg Biggins, they put in some crystal balls that he might have his next destination in mind. and they put in a pretty strong crystal ball to Washington. And Lars, what do you think? Because this defensive line class is pretty loaded as it is, not just in terms of talent, but just in terms of bodies. Because if this were to happen, that would be the 5th body that Washington would have. And they're all really talented guys. But do you think that they would have to run somebody off, or somebody might end up decommitting to have to make sure that Wilhite would be able to sign with Washington in December?
I think so, because I mean, there's certain positions where, yes, you want to have depth, and we're going to talk about that later in this segment and future segments, but you don't want to just I mean, they took 6 defensive backs or 5 defensive backs because the numbers were so off, right? There was nobody in that room from a depth perspective, so they had to get a bunch of guys in. Sorry.
Excuse you.
But I think when it comes to defense, I mean, you look at Noah Carter, 4-star, Omar Khan, 3-star, these big bodies that are already on the line, and you're only really losing Braylon Trice and Zion Tupu after the season. I mean,
no, you're not. Just on the edge, you are, but they're losing 4 defensive linemen.
Right, and so I think it's a matter of which type of bodies are they going after, because Keontae, to your point, is that bigger, but he's not necessarily just an edge, right? He could be an edge, but he's more of a natural defensive lineman. We'll talk about another defensive lineman here in a little bit that, that's the one where you make the room for. So if you have to run somebody off, I think that's the one you run them off for, not necessarily because I think you can take a couple more guys, right? But one might have to decommit, and I do think they could lose one. It wouldn't be a West Coast kid. I just think there might be, as time goes along, just natural fits, things like that. Maybe a kid who wants to stay closer to home, that sort of thing. But the other ones that they're already committed, I don't think that they're going to lose. So I think it's a matter of just kind of making the numbers work from a roster and scholarship perspective.
So I agree with you there, and I am really curious to see how this works out. And we are going to continue talking about this kind of in the next segment. But I'm very curious to see how it works out, because I was talking to a coach that's played against Wilhite a couple of times a little bit earlier today. And the coach told me he's a really powerful dude, and he's really, really raw. And you can kind of see that in his film, that he's really powerful. He's got a really just desirable body type, 6'5", getting close to 240 pounds, just really, really long arms, where you could use him on the interior if you want, in kind of a Voitanufi kind of mold where, he could play on the edge, he could play on the interior, just kind of be that tweener that you look for, because Noah Carter is just an insanely impressive athlete. And then talk about Ratumana Bulabalavu, who's just one of my favorite prospects in this class, which is the burst and everything that he provides on the interior. But you're right, it is a really, really full defensive class. And I don't think that there's just one guy that we might need to talk about. There might end up being 2. Mm-hmm. That you can talk about and just say, oh, well, if this guy wants to commit, that might, shuffle around some, just some room and some scholarships where, the Husky personnel might just say, we might end up wanting to take this guy over this guy. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that they're losing 4 defensive linemen. So right now with the 4 D linemen that they have committed, it kind of evens that out. While you might want to save room for somebody through the portal, I can confirm, just like when I was talking to a recruit over the summer, Deshaun Warner, who ended up committing to Kansas, that one of the big selling points on ending up in Washington was the ability to compete for playing time really early on. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, where maybe, they'll take a 5th and even maybe a 6th defensive lineman in this class with that selling point of, we're going to need you to play as a true freshman, because we've talked about Zach Durfee on this program. We talked about Maurice Himes and Voitanufi and Lance Holtzclaw, where that's a really, really talented group of edge rushers. But so we didn't even talk about Sakai Salafoa, who might have 1 year left remaining. His situation is a little bit confusing in terms of just COVID eligibility. So that one is something we might need to do a little bit more digging on, and if he'll come back, and if not. So there's the possibility that a lot of guys are going to be gone after the season, and everyone in the fold doesn't necessarily have a whole ton of snaps under their belt. So getting just more bodies in the door, and more talented bodies, because Noah Carter, super talented body. Everyone that we mentioned, everyone in this recruiting class, that includes Dominic Kirks, Omar Khan, they're all really, really talented players who can make an impact at the college level. And it's just in terms of, what does the coaching staff want, and will other situations arise?
Right, and I think that latter one is more the key, right? Will other situations arise? Because I don't necessarily think at this point Washington would run anybody off. I mean, you could take Wilhite and that could maybe close out the class, but it's that other one, that extra one, that the bigger name, if you will, that 5-star, if you will, that that coveted national prospect.
He's not
right, but But that's the type of guy to where that's when you start
Sure.
to say, hey, okay, which do we want, him or do we want him? And it's not
Sure.
And I think that's also why when other schools get in the mix for committed recruits, it's like, okay, maybe you don't think about it initially, but then you look at the location and you look at just natural fit. And the other thing we've seen with the portal, Washington's okay letting guys go, knowing they could potentially get him back. I know Jeremy Bernard's kind of an outlier example there, but I mean, there is a way to where you can naturally kind of break that relationship in the moment, but be like, hey, you know what? If you want to stay closer to home, you do that. We'll do this. And then if the numbers work out in a year or two from now and you want to decide to come back over here, we got no problem with that. And I think that's kind of how the staff is going to handle it one way or another.
Before we continue here, time to take a second here to talk about the good people over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Looks like, the Huskies, they're doing a really good job of just trying to find some talented guys, and they don't need to advertise on LinkedIn, especially with the talent that they've been able to acquire, not only on the field but in the coaching staff as well. All you got to do is add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. And that's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Rolling right along here with the recruiting talk. Lars, we've been hinting at a certain name where that person is still committed to Arizona, but there are some writers down there and some others around the country that seem to be indicating that someone is going to open up another player is going to open up their recruitment very soon. And I want to hand it off to you, just as you have been the longtime recruiting guru in this area for that name drop. So please take it away.
Yeah, well, it's kind of coincidental that Washington is going to be likely losing a former edge rusher from the state of Arizona and Braylon Trice after the season to go on to the NFL. Another former current Arizona, and actually Mateo Mela's alum, South Point Catholic, Elijah Rushing is who we're alluding to. That Washington has kind of been, I don't want to say quietly there, because I think they've sort of always been there for him, but just they've never been that school that kind of emerged early on. But I think as his recruitment has gone along and as he's seen firsthand what Washington can do, I think a lot of recruits, Elijah's not the only one, but the example here being Elijah, that you can see immediate playing time, as we talked about at Washington. The NIL thing, which we'll talk about later on in the segment, Washington is clearly crushing it on that level. There's no doubt about that. So I think if you're a player and you're a recruit, Washington will never get in the business of paying recruits for visits or things like that Ohio State AD Gene Smith was alluding to a couple of weeks ago. But one thing that Washington will say is, hey, once you get here and once you start proving yourself, there's a limitless potential that you have on and off the field. So I think that is kind of what Washington's pitch. And if you're a recruiter and saying, okay, well, it's almost like, hey, I'm going to give you an $800,000 loan as a cash advance, or do you want to make, these are hypothetical numbers here, 1.5 on the back end as you earn it over time. I think if you're a recruit, you want to see the long-term payoff versus, we saw what happened with Jaden Rashad at Florida or Miami, whichever one it was. Hey, you're going to get 13 point whatever million, and then you sign, and it's like, wait a minute, where's that money? What happened here? And so I think that's why Washington will never play that game. And the game that they're playing certainly is appealing, and it's certainly working on and off the field. So I think the longer this goes, I think Elijah ultimately will decommit. It's just a matter of when, just because I think at this point, no offense to Arizona, but I think he's kind of that recruit where he has so much higher ceiling, so much higher potential. And it's not a knock to Arizona, right? It's almost like an in-state kid not having Washington State or Blair Gatlin, Gatlin Blair, sorry, in Idaho, where he could have gone to other schools. He decided to stay home at Boise State. It's a little bit different situation. But a lot of these guys, when you get in the 5-star category, it's like, hey, I kind of want to take my talents to the best potential school.
And there are going to be a lot of suitors. It's not like we're saying that Elijah Rushing is coming to Washington. It's going to be a battle. USC is going to be. It sounds like there's a good chance he might stay on the West Coast. USC is obviously going to be in there. Oregon is 100% going to be in there. And then the other suitor that it was kind of sounding like just before he made his initial commitment, just from rumors that we're hearing and from rumors that have been going around just throughout really just the internet space from other reporters. Is that this is happening. So there's speculation, but there's a lot of smoke here, which is why we want to make sure we talk about this. And then the other school that it sounded like was Rushing was really high on is Notre Dame. So there's still going to be a whole lot of just speculation is really the term that you can say in terms of the future, because we don't know what's going to happen, but this is just something we wanted to make sure that we put out into the world. Because it's our job to report on these things when we hear them.
Right. Well, and the thing is, it's like the caveat being, we're not saying he's going to Washington, right?
Right.
But Washington will be in the mix. I think that's why I wanted to kind of say with Elijah, he's that guy that is going to have so much potential.
Yes,
the ceiling is a lot higher. He's a guy where you wait till either that December signing period or even February, because especially with the numbers in the room, he's that cherry on top. He's not the guy you're building your class around, because you already have, as you mentioned, Noah Carter, Khan, all those guys. So I think he's that cherry on top, if you will.
And somebody else that we've talked about on this program that is waiting till the December signing day, that could also just be somebody who Husky fans need to keep in mind, is 4-star lineman Jericho Johnson, because it sounds like according to some of our buddies over at 247 Sports, will probably be visiting for the Oregon game in a couple of weeks, and they've put together a great list of some of the visitors that are coming. So check out their boards, their page, go subscribe to them as well. About some of the players that are going to be there. And a lot of that is premium information. So we're not going to get into that here and outscoop them or do anything like that. But that is a rumor that I know you and I have also heard as well, just separate from that. So that's a name that needs to be just kind of watched very closely, because currently he's only taken one official visit, and that's Washington. And it sounds like he is trying to set up a couple more before the December signing period, and it will probably be USC and Oregon as well. So it's going to be really, really hard for the Huskies to hold on, but the atmosphere and everything that it sounds like they're just trying to set up and do just kind of on the recruiting front for the Oregon game is going to be really huge. Mm-hmm. And getting Jericho Johnson and some of the other names that are expected to come in that weekend, I think it's going to be vital and could kind of, and I don't know if it's going to be the deciding factor, but the fact that the Huskies are getting another visit from him and not just saying, oh yeah, he's going to visit, because he took an unofficial to Oregon for the Colorado game, and he's stated that he does want to get down to USC. I wouldn't be surprised if he did that for the Washington game as well, which would also kind of be really interesting. But he's somebody who said he wants to wait till the December signing period, but is somebody that is that the Huskies are very high on, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think Jericho was kind of always seemed like it was going to be a USC Washington about it. Oregon has always kind of just crept into that.
They always hang around, yeah.
But I think legitimately at the end of the day, this is going to be a USC Washington battle. And I think but the Oregon game is kind of that in between game where it's like, hey, can you get him up? Can you just impress him? Can you just do whatever you need to do? But I think he's a guy where same thing I said with Zoom. It's the relationships are going to matter more than anything. It's not going to be whether or not Washington can blow Oregon out. That's not going to be the reason Jericho Johnson commits to Washington, right? I think it's going to be the whole body of work, that relationship that he has with Inoki Rectorfield, the relationship he has with Chuck Morrell, William Inge, Kalen DeBoer, all the entire staff. So I think
Courtney Morgan as well. He deserves props in every single.
Absolutely. I mean, Courtney's at the top of the list right next to Kalen. But with that being said, it's actually to your point, that's all those relationships, right? It's not just the position coach. It's not just the coordinator. It's everybody. And so I think, especially for a kid who knows he's going to sign in December, which is good for Washington, because once that paper comes in, your hands are clean. It's the kids that want to wait until February that are like, oh, okay, now we got to try all over again. We got to basically re-recruit you, if you will. So I think with Jericho, there's a more likelihood that he ends up in Washington than say Elijah or Keontae's kind of already in the bag at this point. But not I shouldn't say in the bag, but yeah,
your words, not mine.
He would be kind of the best. Right, but I think if we're ranking them, right, probably Wilhite, Johnson, rushing. Not that there's a huge gap in between those three.
I would say there's a gap
likelihood
between
to
1
sign
and
with
2,
Washington.
and then there's a much bigger gap between 2 and 3. That's kind of how I
yes,
would
exactly.
I would
But
right now.
It's not like the
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And but I think they're all three guys you would want to take. They're all three guys you want to take. It's just a matter of do the numbers work out? And one thing we always have to consider, because it comes up every year, and maybe not with Washington, but just naturally, is attrition, right? Guys that, hey, wow, I didn't think he would leave. I mean, people never really saw Savell Small as being a guy that would not blossom and leave at Washington, but things happen, you don't work out, just got to do what you got to do. So I think that's where those other numbers can come into play.
No, absolutely. And then another name that you just real quickly that you might want to keep an eye on for Husky fans that follow the recruiting world and everything is 3-star offensive tackle Ikinasio Tupou, who is another name we have mentioned on the show, especially even after the commitment of offensive lineman David Boyajian. It does kind of feel like that that Scott Huff does want to take just one more body along the offensive line, and Tupu is just another big multiple frame. And we've talked about it on other shows, like just some of the bodies that they took in 22. Keona Wilhite, just he's another body in that mold. Sayone Fasolo is the other one, where it's just, if this guy works out, great. He's got all the projectables, and that's something that happens a lot at the college level, where it's, this is just a really big-bodied offensive lineman with good movement skills. You take him, and you figure the rest out later. And that's kind of what would happen on the defensive line as well, right? Where it's just, okay, we have all these talented players that want to commit to us. We're going to take as many of them as we possibly can and figure the rest out on campus, which is just smart and the right way to go about it. And before we move on here, got to remind our friends about the good people over at FanDuel, because you can snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And since it's bye week, I'm going to remind everybody again that Caleb Williams is currently the Heisman favorite over Michael Penix right now. So you can get some decent odds about if you wanted to play some bets on Michael Penix on FanDuel. Just, throwing that out into the world. You do what you want, but especially if you haven't placed a bet on FanDuel, this would be a great time to do it and get those bonus bets too. All right, Lars, you talked about NIL success and just everything that the Huskies are doing in the last segment. And it's something we've written about on a fair amount on Inside the Huskies. You can check out some of our work on that, go over there. But today, as we record this on Tuesday, has been a very interesting day in the NIL space so far, as quarterback Michael Penix and wide receiver Rome Odunze became the first football NIL athletes to sign with Adidas, who is Washington's partner for all athletic apparel. And I think that this is, not only is it really huge just for those guys in general, but it's just kind of what I feel like a lot of fans were expecting in terms of just the relationship with Adidas when this first started. Obviously, when that relationship first became official, they couldn't do something like this because NIL was not a thing yet. But the expectation was always, Louisville, Miami, these are some of the other big brands that are with Adidas. But Adidas had kind of made this commitment of, we want Washington to be the flagship school. And with this and with everything that this kind of signifies, I think that this deal is huge for the Huskies as well as just kind of football players as a whole moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it also lays the foundation for future Washington players and guys that are currently in the room. I mean, you have Michael Penix and Rome Odunze right now, but you got Austin Mack coming. You got Rasheed Williams. You got Tayshaun Lyons. You got all these big Justice Williams in the 2024 class coming. Jason Robinson in the 24 class coming. You got all these guys coming, and it's like Washington's message on the recruiting trail and after players signed for NIL has been, if you put in the work and you perform, you will reap the rewards. And that's exactly what these guys are doing. I mean,
right.
You're talking about the best quarterback in the country, arguably, next to Caleb Williams, and the best receiver in the country next to Marvin Harrison. these guys have put in the work and done everything possible. I mean, when Rome Odunze signed, this was never a thought. So the fact that all these guys are now getting what they deserve is just a testament to kind of how Washington has handled the NIL space. And there's a lot of schools struggling with it, and there's a lot of schools that are not. And Washington is one of those schools that from the beginning has been like, hey, you know what? We don't even have a state bill that allows us to do NIL, so we got to follow the state, not the state guidelines, but the ethics laws in the state. But beyond that, there's so much that they can do. And the Adidas partnership, I think, was one where it's like, wow, okay, this is Adidas. It's like Oregon's got Nike. What do we have? It's like Adidas, I think, is doing it better. I mean, the case is there, right? I mean, we're going to find out how good the marketability will be. But if you think about it, I mean, like, it's not built on flash, it's built on substance. And especially for guys that are going into the NFL, you can maintain those partnerships moving forward. There's nothing that says when Michael Penix gets to the NFL and Rome Odunze gets to the NFL, they can't still be Adidas athletes. I mean, maybe there's something that I'm missing on that level.
Obviously we haven't seen all the terms of the deal, but I feel like that's where this is going, is that this is a signing not just for college, but moving forward as well. It might be like a multi-year deal kind of thing where going forward, like I wouldn't be surprised if this is like, oh, during like the draft cycle, we see these path to the draft videos about Rome and about Mike through Adidas. And I think that would be really interesting, just kind of, as they get drafted, it's, oh yeah, this guy's already signed with Adidas, those kinds of things. And that could be really big because these are things that do matter to some of these high school recruits. Just, oh yeah, like I'm not going to go down that whole thought process, especially just, Nike Rareware versus Adidas and everything like that. But it's a very interesting thing to think about as Lars shows off the Adidas pullover he's got on today.
Right, but I think that's kind of what you want for Washington. Is you want a built-in substance. You're not paying players just to be on your team, right? You want that, because that's what really NIL should be about. It's not pay for play. It's play and earn your pay. That's what Washington is doing, and it's from a coaching perspective. It's what Ryan Grubb did. Dude, Taylor doesn't play call last year. Gets Austin Mack, gets a $2 million raise. Gets $1.5 million raise. He's making $2 million a year now. So it's like, it's no different for coaches as it is for players, where Mike comes over from Indiana, lights the world on fire last year. Everybody gets to learn about him. And that's the other part about this, is they're such that's not a shot at anybody else that's on a different team.
These are just the people that we interact with. So
But when you're a big brand like Adidas and you're investing in players, you're also doing it, and to your point, from the perspective of, okay, well, clearly NFL teams like these guys, because Adidas ain't going to throw money at a guy that's going to be an undrafted player, right? That's just not what they're going to do. So I think it's also a feather in the cap to both of the players, saying, hey, these guys are going to be top draft picks next year, and also great players, great ambassadors. It's a brand ambassador on a higher level, effectively, I think is what it's going to be.
No, absolutely. And it's not like these are the only deals that these guys are getting too, because you can talk about Michael Penix being part of the Beats Elite core. Both of those guys, along with Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk. I know Edifani Lefosio got one too, getting those like just t-shirt deals with Simply Seattle. And Simply Seattle is a really, really interesting deal in the NIL space, where they haven't just sponsored football players. They've done stuff with the softball team. I'm sure we'll see more basketball stuff moving forward too. And they're giving players up to a 50% royalty on some stuff, and then 100% on other things. Go check out some of just their press releases and everything. That they're doing a really, really interesting job of things in the NIL space. And I think it's really beneficial for not just them and being able to just do truly good work and sponsor with athletes who are really deserving. We saw like they did something with, I believe it was Ruby Malin on the softball team. And if, like, let's say Wesley Yates, the 5-star freshman that signed with the Huskies this past year on the basketball team, has a big year. That's another guy who you could see something like that in the near future. So I believe it's something I might have put in one of my articles on Inside the Huskies. Michael Penix has really been the one who just kind of set the tone for all this, where you can display it not only to high school guys, but transfer portal, like just potential transfer guys as well, where you can put somebody like Mike on we saw the great article that our buddy Mike Varel did over with the Seattle Times, talking about what Mike's Heisman campaign is going to look like, the bus campaign and whatever, all that, just the AI heat map from Casey Byers and just all the other things that they did. And he can be just this kind of trailblazer in terms of, this is what success in the highest level at Washington is going to look like. And now this Adidas deal is just an extra avenue to just say, yeah, do you want to be like an Adidas sponsored athlete like Anthony Edwards, Donovan Mitchell, like some of these other guys where you can point the list. There are no football players coming to me off the top of my head. I know they have a Patrick Mahomes. How did I forget that? I'm sure people were just yelling at me hearing that, but it's in that similar vein of, yeah, Patrick Mahomes is signed with Adidas, and we're also sponsoring Michael Penix and Rome Odunze. You could be next doing that at Washington if you succeed. And you're right. Washington will never get behind the pay for play. And just these are all avenues pointing of where, when Montlake Futures was created and all of these other just kind of NIL regulations, everything that around that went into place, fans were just kind of saying, all right, what's that going to look like at Washington? Now, instead of just rolling it all out right away, just saying, yep, here, this is all it takes time, and it's built up. And you're right, they've built it up the right way. And I think it personally, as somebody who has long advocated for it, these players deserve to be compensated for what they're doing, especially in the billion-dollar industry that is college football. And it's just very cool to see what Washington has done with that.
And if you think about the two, it's kind of symbolic for the two players because Michael Penix has been through so much, right? With 3 injuries, he has to transfer, never played more than 6 games in a year, is now on the chance of winning a national championship this year if everything goes right. And Rome Odunze, who was one of the best receivers in the country when he came to Washington out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, and then was a part of that 21 team.
Yep.
And had to suffer through all that. And never once said a bad word about that team that entire year. Just kept on moving, kept the business, and now he's blossoming, and everyone's kind of seeing who the great person that Rome is. So I think that's why these guys are attracted to the Washington brand and the Washington players, is because it's a good brand to get behind. And I think that's what Washington fans are going to like to see about the NIL space is, hey, I want to support these guys because they're also good dudes. It's not just, oh, hey, he's coming for a year. It's a 1-year rental and he leaves. He doesn't really care about us and things like that. It's like, no, it's sustainability. I mean, what's the phrase that Kalen and Boer also kind of likes to use a lot? Like not sustained success, but kind of staying power, right?
Yes.
You have staying power. That's what I was looking for. That's what all these deals are setting up for. It's staying power, where Washington is going to be that top NIL brand for years to come, not just every couple of years because they happen to have a good offense and a good coaching staff.
I like that a lot. And I feel like that's a great place to wrap it up. Lars, as always, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate all the everydayers out there that tune into the show, leave comments, do whatever it is that they do. It really is awesome. And we really want to thank you so much for how this show has grown over just the span of a couple months. As I look at the date and see the recording date, this is officially just 2 months of this show. And we're getting close to 600 subscribers on YouTube, and we really want to see that number keep going. So thank you all for that. Make sure wherever you're watching this video or listening to it that you are subscribed, leave us a 5-star review, and just leave comments. We do try to get to as many of those as possible. With it being a bye week, we are going to try to do a mailbag at some point. Stay tuned because we will have a special guest on, at least one, at some point this week. And just wherever you listen to this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we are everywhere. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, ask us questions, follow us on Twitter, do whatever it is that you feel you need to do to get in touch with us. We really appreciate it, and we will talk to you on Thursday.